ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about income and how you can see potential changes in income coming in your future through your astrology chart. Today we're going to be talking about solar arcs. These are a little bit more intermediate in your astrology journey. So if you are a beginner, I would recommend going to astro.com and putting in your chart here. To do that, you just go to astro.com. You may have to, type in your email and the password or something. But once you do that, you'll go down, you'll click horoscopes, and then you'll click extended chart selection, and that will bring you to this page. And if you haven't added your birth chart before, you're going to add it here. I'm going to open it in a new tab so you can see what that looks like. And here's your birth data entry. So you're going to press continue, and it should take you back over here. If not, you just go back over here and click extended chart selection under horoscope drawings and data. And then you're going to collect the name of the whatever you named your astrology profile that you entered in over here. For today's example, we're going to be using J.K. Rowling to show you what a massive or major change in wealth could look like if you look at the chart. If you guys have been hoping for a change in income, if you have been, if you've had very low income for a very long time and you're hoping for a light at the end of the tunnel that might indicate, big changes when you're going to make the big bucks, this is a great way of seeing that. So this is just one of the many things you can see in the chart that could indicate a change in income. This is not, this one video is not going to discuss every possible thing in the chart that could indicate a change in income. Today we're just talking about solar arcs, so there's a lot of other things as well that could indicate a change, like transits or progressions, but those are going to be things that we're going to discuss in another video. But for today we're going to stick to solar arcs. So if you are unfamiliar with solar arcs, I would recommend doing a little bit of research because it might help you out a little bit. I really like this website, astrologyweekly.com. I can post this link in the description. This talks about solar arcs, but this is also just a really great forum where there's a lot of really great astrologers who talk about, in depth different topics. But here they're talking about solar arcs and what they mean. Also, there's this really great book written on solar arcs by Natal Chart. He was really into them, so I would suggest, giving that a read as well if you need to, want to develop a better understanding. But anyways, today we're going to be talking about J.K. Rowling. So she, I think, is a very good example for this sort of case study of looking at the astrological chart for a major change in wealth. Because for the first 30 years of her life, she was really quite broke. It even says, like in the very first paragraphs of her bio, that she lived in relative poverty until the first novel of Harry Potter was published in 1997. So a lot of this video is going to be focused around 1997 because that's obviously the time when her her income dramatically changed from being really, really low to suddenly, she's not just making, enough money to survive, but she's making a lot of money. Now, in the beginning, of course, it wasn't like she was rolling in tons of money, but she had consistent income, coming in 1997 that was allowing her to get ahead. And I think prior to that, she had been on welfare, so she was kind of barely making it. And also her life overall was really not easy. I forget when it was, but her mother died, and that was really hard on her because she was very close to her mother. And so Harry Potter itself, the first book, a lot of her feelings related to her mother's death are symbolized in different things in the book. So I think there's a lot of things in the book, like the magical creatures and stuff, or that symbolize her feelings about her mother's death. So it was a very personal project for her, but it was also, it was something she was throwing herself into for a number of years, and during that time, she also got married. If you can see down here, she got married and she had a child, but the man that she married was, I can't say anything about him, but I just know that the marriage was very short and catastrophic. And at some point, he even held the manuscript of her first book hostage to, I guess, get his way. with things around the house. But obviously, the first manuscript for Harry Potter was incredibly important to her, and that's why he chose it to hold hostage. But I think it was more important than just making money. I think, that book meant a lot to her in other ways. So anyways, we're going to be talking about her chart for 1997. And there's a little nice photo in case you guys aren't familiar. And these are the books in case you guys haven't, maybe I'm older. But these are pretty famous still, I think. So this is her natal birth chart. And so she was born on July 31st of 1965. This is what the planets were doing on that date. And, this shows the ascendant for the time that she was born. The ascendant, this part of the chart, and the midheaven, and all of these angles that you can see here, these black lines, they're all going to drastically vary depending on the time of birth and the place of birth. So anyways, this is what her natal chart looked like. And one interesting thing that stands out to me here is that this chart doesn't look easy. And you can see that because she's got that Saturn strongly opposite Pluto, as well as Uranus. But specifically, Saturn opposite Pluto is often seen in charts of people who have to deal with a great deal of frustration in their lives. So, they may really relentlessly try to get ahead, but they constantly are beset by obstacles and delays, or people standing in their way, authority figures, that don't want them to get ahead. And, you can see this opposition between Saturn and Pluto really does kind of show how delayed she was, in the sense that, the first 30 years of her life, it was hard for her to even just make enough money to get by. And so anyways, we're really going to focus on this opposition because this opposition between Saturn and Pluto plays a large role in what actually ended up indicating the major change in her finances. So I do want to just show you what solar arcs kind of look like. So this is the natal chart over here with solar arc directions for July 31st of 1965. So what you can see is her birth date itself is July 31st of 1965. And I set the solar arc directions for the same date as her birth so that you could see that, these green symbols out here, they represent the solar arc directions. You can see that they're in the exact same position as the planets in her natal chart, the planets and positions in her natal chart. This represents the ascendant. The ascendant is at the exact same point. Saturn, same point. Chiron, same point. All around here, you can see they're all at the same degree as her natal birth chart points and planets. And that's because we haven't had any time pass, right? So if you move ahead a year, you'll see this is now 1966, exactly a year away from her birth. You'll see that Saturn has actually moved forward a degree. Everything here has moved forward a degree. So the way the solar arcs work is you have your natal birth chart, and for every year of your life, the solar arcs move forward 1 degree. So if you can see here, another year, 1967, every single one of these green points on the outside of her natal birth chart, these are the solar arcs, and they're all moving 1 degree per year. So you can see they're all moving at the same pace together. None of these points are moving faster than the other points. They're all moving in the same pace, moving at the same pace. So now we're at 1977. We're going to keep going. You can see how they just keep going. It's just like, a static wheel here and just a wheel outside that's just moving. And now we're at 1997. So this is the year of importance because this is when Harry Potter was actually published. And it was actually pretty hard for her to get it published in the first place. It's not the first story of a really talented author having trouble getting published or finding a publisher that's willing to work with her. But anyways, in her case, it was in 1997 that a publisher finally agreed to publish the Harry Potter book, the first installment in the series. And I just wanted to use this to show you how solar arcs work. Now we're going to go over here. And I'm just going to move this back really quick. Yeah. Okay, so this is again the same thing going. It's natal chart with the solar arcs on the outside. So this is the natal chart with the solar arcs on the outside. And I just want to tell you really quick how you can actually pull this up yourself, because this is quite confusing. If you go back to this site, and again, you click on horoscopes, then you go to extended chart selection, and then you enter in the particular chart you want to look at, you're going to click on their chart type where it says natal chart wheel, and you're going to scroll down until you see natal and solar arc direction. So you click on that, show chart, and this will show you the natal chart, just like the one we're looking at over here. And on the outside, it'll show you the solar arcs for the date and the year that you've put in. So that's just to show you how you can do it yourself at home. But anyways, back to the chart. So what we really want to focus on here is this Saturn, this Pluto, this Uranus. But what we're going to be looking at, since this is her natal opposition, we're going to look at how the solar arc planets related to this move over time. So the opposition is here, but it never really goes away, because essentially, since those planets are in those positions, they're always going to be opposed to each other by solar arc. So Saturn's always going to be somewhere opposite Pluto and Uranus over here, because they're going to move, together at the same time, degree by degree. So Saturn and Pluto, you're going to want to watch how these two solar arc planets move. Okay. Also, we want to pay attention to the Ascendant, because that's also going to be doing something really important here. And we want to look at the solar arc Mars as well. So we will begin. So right now we're at 1966. We're going to keep going, and we're going to watch the planets move up until 1997. Okay, so here's 1997, and as you can see, the planets and the points have moved quite a bit. I think about 32 degrees. And first, we're just going to talk about the Ascendant. This, out of all of these 4 points, is probably the least related to finances, but it is important because the Ascendant rules over your identity and how you sort of present yourself to the outer world, and how you kind of identify as a person, I guess, in some ways. It also represents your personal interests, things that are really important to you. And so I think that for her, that book was quite a personal thing for her. A lot of the subject matter was inspired by the emotions related to her mother's death. So it was kind of her real personal form of expression. And what's important here is you can see the Ascendant, which is the most important point here as regards to like the self and the expression of the self and everything. It has moved by solar arc all the way to conjunct her natal Saturn. And this is important because this is the first time that the solar arc Ascendant has hit anything in her chart, as far as conjuncted anything in her first house. And a lot of people aren't even going to have planets in their first house. But this just shows that this particular period of time is very important because essentially this solar arc is shining light on her personal interests, her personal endeavors, personal projects. And I think that this sort of shows the fact that, this was the year when she became a published author. And this is when people were finally starting to see her for her personal interests, her personal projects, her being an author, her being a really good writer. And so, yeah, I just thought that was interesting because the Ascendant really is shining light on her personal efforts. And so you can see that because the Ascendant is hitting something in her first house, Saturn. So anyways, on to the next thing. This is the really major thing that stands out to me for 1997. Well, all three of these things. But it's because when you want to look for major changes in your finances, specifically your income for this video, you always want to look at your second house because the second house rules over finances. It rules over income. So if you want to look for a change in your income, there has to be there doesn't have to be, but we would typically expect to see some sort of major aspect affecting the second house, planets that are in the second house, which there are no planets here, or the second house ruler. And to determine the second house ruler, you need to look at the second house cusp, and you have to look at what sign it falls in. And to do that, you're going to look at, the number here, which is 2, and you're going to look to the left of that. The line to the left of that 2 is going to be your second house cusp. And here it falls in the sign Aries, which is ruled by Mars. And Mars, if you look at her natal chart, is up here in Libra. This is Libra, and there's Mars at 17 degrees of Libra. So what we would want to look for in her chart, if we wanted to see if there were going to be any changes in income, would be any major aspects hitting Mars. And when we look at the solar arc chart for 1997, there are quite a lot of aspects hitting this. You also want to look at the solar arc Mars. So this is the natal Mars, and then all of these points on the outside, they're the solar arc, points and planets. And since this is natal Mars, this is solar arc Mars over here. So first, we're going to discuss this opposition in her natal chart and how it is aspecting this natal Mars. So we discussed this before, but what's important here is that her natal Mars isn't just being aspected by one solar arc planet. It's being aspected by Saturn, solar arc Saturn, which if you look down here, you can see exactly what degree it's at in the solar arc chart. You can see it right here. It says SA, that represents solar arc. Saturn is at 17 degrees of Aries down here. And natal Mars is at 17 degrees of Libra. So solar arc Saturn opposite natal Mars. That's a pretty major solar arc to have in your chart, coupled with the fact that this solar arc Saturn is also part of it's got that opposition to solar arc Pluto and Uranus. So every time that solar arc Saturn aspects something, solar arc Pluto and solar arc Uranus are going to aspect that thing as well. Now Saturn's going to hit whatever it aspects first, but then it'll be followed by Pluto and then Uranus. Either way, this sort of set off a bit of a domino effect because you had this, then you had this and this hitting her natal second house ruler Mars. So a lot of really major change in her finances. So that would have begun in 1997, but then Pluto would have exactly hit that Mars, I think, a couple years later. And then I think maybe 3 years after that, Uranus would have hit the natal Mars. So those are all, this is some really, really on its own. This is a super strong indication of some sort of major event in her life, a major change related to her finances. Because also one reason why we like using solar arcs is because they really do tend to indicate major events in your life. They're not just internal changes. They usually always indicate, or not always, but I mean, at least in my experience, they're really good indicators of some sort of major event in your life that's going to indicate a change in your that you're actually going to see and witness, outer events that affect you. So in the real world. So the important thing here is that her natal Mars isn't just being aspected by one planet, it's being aspected basically by 3, or it's about to be. It's this natal opposition has now come to hit the natal Mars, and it's really setting it off. It's really triggering it because it's not just Saturn, it's Pluto and Uranus. So it's 3 different things that are like honing in on her second house that indicates a lot of major change. Now also, another thing that's really interesting is that in astrology, we have a thing kind of called double whammies. So, if one thing in a chart indicates something, if you have kind of the reverse of that happening as well at the same time, then it really indicates that an event is going to happen. And an example of that would be if you see the natal Mars is being heavily aspected, or aspected by anything really. Even if this was just Pluto here, if Saturn wasn't doing, opposing Mars, and if Uranus wasn't even conjuncting Mars, if it was just Pluto here, and it was conjuncting this natal Mars, but at the same time, if you had solar arc Mars over here, also aspecting something in the natal chart, then that's a really, really strong indication that something major is going to change, or there's going to be some sort of major change related to your income, finances, values, because those are all second house things, and that's what Mars rules. So the common element there is that, Mars in the natal chart and Mars by solar arc are both making really important, strong aspects by solar arc here. And so that really kind of emphasizes that there are going to be major changes related to her finances. So yeah, that's not just like one, it's like four different things heavily, like strongly impacting her Mars, which rules her second house. Now, in your chart, when you look at your chart, there could be planets over here. You're going to need to pay attention to those. So if you have planets over here, you're going to need to watch for if one of these, solar arc planets comes and aspects them. It could be by conjunction, opposition, square, semi-square as well. You'll have to look into that if you aren't familiar with it. I might explain it in another video. But I just kind of want to keep this one simple. And you're also going to need to, so yeah, you're going to want to pay attention to if any of your second house planets get aspected. And you're also going to want to pay attention to your second house ruler, which would be Mars for J.K. Rowling. So that's just one way that you guys can check to see if you have any upcoming changes in your income. If you guys have any questions, please leave them down below. And in another video, I'll be discussing another example, perhaps with somebody else, about how transits can indicate potential changes in income, as well as another video separately about how progressions could potentially indicate changes in income. And also during this time, J.K. Rowling also had an important progression happening that also affected her second house as well. So it does line up. So I might use her in the next video. But anyways, guys, have a great night or day. And stay safe.